Hey, Soul fam. So I am here today to give a follow-up word on yesterday's posts about true femininity. And I feel like I kind of focused a lot in yesterday's video on what society pushes as important in terms of our femininity, but I didn't really get to go too deep into the spirit of the feminine and how that energy works and moves in truth in us once we've chosen that, instead of all of those ways that we might mask or perform femininity, ways that it's actually like rooted in our being. And I also want to bring some more clarity to a few of the things that I was saying in that last video first, because I felt myself a bit anxious after releasing that word of like, oh man, I really don't want, all my sisters who do have modifications, do have body modifications, do have plastic surgery, do have, their nails on fleek all the time, that do be doing their nails, and to feel judged, to feel like they're doing something wrong. That was really not the heart of the message. And so I want to kind of drill in more of like the heart of the message in this video. And, I obviously feel very passionate about these things, and I have been deeply convicted by my Holy Spirit, by the Holy Spirit, by the Christ, by my feminine council of guides, by Magdalene and Mother Mary, to walk in the most natural way that I possibly can. And so, like, forgive me for sharing my fire, my passion, and my conviction if that ever comes off in a way of like, obviously I'm holding and I'm standing for righteousness that I feel in myself, and I am being convicted in these things just the same as anybody else. But I am just so not here to like, and I just want to keep saying that. I know I said in the last video, like, no shame. I'm like really not here to shame, blame anybody. I do though want to keep getting people to think about these things and feel into these things for themselves. And even if they're uncomfortable, I also want women to know, like, yo, if you have been feeling these things, but it's been easy to just be like, oh yeah, like I know this isn't the best thing for me to like put this plastic on my nails and suffocate my nails, or no, it's not the best thing for me to like dye my hair or this or that, but like everyone else is doing it and it's just like, okay. I want to balance that out, and say like, no, there's other women out here that are transcending the pressure of our society, or trying at least to transcend the pressure of our society and like move a little bit different, act a little bit different, that is ultimately more pro-life, that's just like more pro-life force. Okay, so that is, again, I'm just like gonna want to keep affirming my narrative because I want people to feel safe to receive what I'm saying. And obviously I want people to feel, if they feel convicted by the message just within themselves, amazing. But I want people to also feel empowered and inspired to make different decisions, not out of shame or like they're doing something bad or wrong, but just out of empowerment of like, there's a better way, and if you're feeling that, be in truth with that. And even if it's hard, to make these decisions, because things have been so normalized, and again, even sometimes celebrated in our culture, to just be freaking strong. You gotta be strong. Gotta be strong. And I gotta be strong too. Like, that's the other thing I wanted to say. Like, I really don't want it to come off that I'm saying, I'm holier than thou, I'm better than thou, like I've transcended these things, like get up here with me. Like, definitely not. I mean, I mentioned like I still put these little dots on my nails, but this morning I was even looking at them, like my nails beds are raising where I've had those dots on for too long. They're like responding to that in a way that is making them look less healthy. My hair, I want to share this story. Actually, this is something I didn't share yesterday, but you can see there's like some small highlights in it. And I shaved my head about, I want to say 3 years ago now. It may have been more like 4. Anyway, I shaved my head, and that was a part of my rebirth process. I did share about that in a previous video, but I did make myself a promise after I shaved my head that I was never going to dye my hair again. And I also told myself that I wasn't going to keep cutting it. alas, it started to grow out. I was having a really hard time with it. I started to snip it. I was like, I'm just gonna rock this like rock or shag, this mullet for a little bit, whatever. And then, I ended up having a really bad haircut experience, and I was like, this is so bad. Like, it's just like this jet black, like bowl cut, like kind of like a Dumb and Dumber cut, honestly. And sorry, I just had a smoothie, burping. But anyway, I was like, I need to lighten it up. And I was like, no, you told yourself you weren't gonna lighten your hair. You weren't gonna do that. And I was just like, really having a hard time accepting the way that I was looking, and this new form and new shape. Because before shaving my head, I had super beautiful, long, almost blonde hair, like down to my waist. And so that was like a part of why I had to do it. I had to really like detach from that as this emblem of my femininity and let that go. And so, yeah, that grow out process was tough for me. I would do it again, but what I wouldn't do again was cave to putting highlights in my hair, because I just couldn't wait long enough for the sun to do its thing and my hair to grow into, what I was hoping for more of. So I remember I want to share, because this also links into what I was sharing about the ways that we're wielding and being mindful of our sexual energy. I had been so good about being in celibacy and like waiting. I was like, I declared like a couple years ago too that I was like, I'm waiting for my kingdom spouse. Like, I'm not gonna, be with a man until I'm like sure he's my husband. And I was with someone for about 6 months, and we ended up crossing that threshold. We were not married, and it actually opened up this like whole, I want to call it like a rupture, like a fracture in my field, that then kind of sent me down this like falling back into old ways and into old patterns. And I started to also take on like some of this person's karma, and I started to struggle with addictions and certain things that I had never had problems with. But one of the other things that happened when I like broke that promise with myself and I betrayed myself in that way, and I have compassion with myself because I can also see that in a way this needed to happen, because it ended up ending that relationship. But then it threw me and spiraled me into other things that were really challenging for me. And in that time was when I made this decision to put highlights in my hair. And I literally remember my like 2 nights after getting these highlights, my head was burning so badly. My hair that I had been growing out like so preciously, praying over my hair as it was growing back from going through the whole process of shaving my head, and I was just so devastated because I just torched my hair. And it's still like, it's so dead. And I remember before doing this, I was like, my hair is so soft. It's so healthy. I'm so proud of my hair. And I just burned it. I burned my crown badly. It literally makes me want to cry thinking about it again, because it's not about the hair. It's about the act of self-betrayal. And I have so much compassion for that, but I also don't want to keep doing that, and I don't want other people to keep doing that. And I can see that when I engage in certain sinful behaviors, and this is why God has these rules laid out for us, why God has this roadmap of like, don't do these things, do these things. And it's not just what's written in the word, it's like what is written in our hearts. Like, we know what is right and what is not. And when we cross those boundaries with ourselves, when we engage and do those things that we know hurt us and aren't ultimately what we want or what God wants for us, we create unnecessary suffering for ourselves, unnecessary karma for ourselves. And yeah, we have to be gentle with ourselves in this process again, because like the pressure is alive and strong, and it's normal. And I laugh at myself later down the line after I went through the grieving process of betraying myself and betraying my promise and breaking that promise, and then letting that kind of like sort of spiral me into this episode of like other things that I was doing, ways I was behaving that weren't in my highest, and karma that I was transmuting that I wouldn't normally have otherwise had to deal with. Kind of started to lose my train of thought. Definitely feeling a lot from that. Wow. I think this is my first time crying on my YouTube. It's the first for everything. But yeah, I just want to share that story because I wanted to like humanize myself a little bit in this, you know, and step down from the part of me that when I was watching that video back, I was like, oh, don't be preaching at people. Like, you're not above anyone. You're not above any of this. But I'm working hard to rise out of these traps, you know. And I also think so much of like my passion and even like some of the feminine pain body that's expressing itself, and I get really rowdy like that, it's like because I'm hurting inside, I'm aching inside, I'm sad inside about the fact that it's like gotten to this, that it's gone this far, that the erasure of the feminine, you know, and putting us into this very small scale box has just become so normal. And this like war on our bodies, it actually makes me so sad. It makes me so sad. And I think sometimes that deep, deep sadness and that deep, deep grief can like, you know, mask itself with like a fire and an anger. But it's like, I want to show you guys today, like, that it's just like deep care that I have for our humanity and for our femininity, you know. And that's where this like righteous fire moves from, not from a place of judgment or shaming. So yeah. I just want to live in a world where it's like normal to embrace ourselves naturally. It's normal to accept ourselves as we are, where there's not this constant pressure to look and be something that we're not. Oh God, you know, I want to live in a world where we celebrate and are connected to and embrace and have gratitude for what we're given by God. And that has to start in me, because like that's not what's become normal in society. It's not. It's become normal to live in the artificial. It's become normal to live in the synthetic. And again, it's become normal to live in lust and to live in sexual overdrive and greed and pleasure seeking. And it's become beyond normal. It's become so glorified. And it's so disrespectful, in my opinion, you know, to God's creation, what has become so normal. And I ache, my heart aches about it. And then I pick myself up and I share my fire and I try to make different decisions, you know, and like find people who are with me in this fight for life, because it feels like that. It feels like this war on our bodies, this war on our energy, this war on our sexual energy, this war on our love and the resources on the earth right now. It kind of depends on us, you know, making these changes in the microcosm, and I don't see them as these like small things, especially when they're repeated and every single person is doing them. Like, I think we grossly underestimate the impact of how much our decisions can ripple and affect creation at large around us. So yeah, I wanted to share that. I didn't expect to have such an emotional reaction, but I'm glad that I am, because so much of this is for me to just let myself be seen in the full spectrum of my humanness and my relationship with the divine, and just let that be a mirror for other people to see themselves, you know, and the triumphs that I have for people to derive strength from those, and the struggles that I have for people to also feel less alone in those. And some of the views that I have about life and creation, you know, especially those that are coming from the way I'm perceiving through the lens of Christ, you know, that those may shift, that they may shift and offer people this breath of fresh air of like, oh, someone else is seeing the world differently, you know? Because I think so much of why we get caught into the pressure of this is because we firmly believe like, well, everyone's doing it, so that's just the way of the world. Like, that's just the way it is, you know? Men are just like this. Men are just visual creatures, and they're gonna prefer me sexually, so I'm just gonna get these boobs, you know? And it's like, you know, girls just like, we're like this. Like, yeah, we just get our little claws and dame and grrr, grrr, you know? That's what's trending. That's the fads. Like, it's okay. But deep down, there's like a dissonance, you know? And I'm just trying to be that voice of like, beyond the fads, beyond the trends, beyond what's normal, beyond the culture, like, what is true, what is living underneath, you know, in the heart of the feminine in me, at least, and in my body. That's like, no. Like, no. This cannot be. This cannot continue. This is not going to last, you know, and we have to make these decisions ultimately because the ones we're hurting the most are ourselves. We're depriving ourselves from those truly loving relationships with the deprogrammed masculine who loves us as we are. We're depriving ourselves from the opportunity of looking at ourselves in the mirror and loving what we see. We're depriving ourselves from just getting to feel and experience the world around us, you know, in our centeredness and our full power, without all the constant mental obsessions about how we look or how we're being perceived, or, you know, how sexy we are, things like this. Yeah, there's stories coming in actually. This elder woman in TP, when I sat in ceremony in on the Pueblo in Taos, my first ever peyote sit, the meeting was called, it was a correction ceremony and an education ceremony for basically people who were coming into the church, who were coming back into the ways, but that did not grow up in the ways, and the ways that there are these really fine lines between cultural appropriation and feeling entitled to just stepping into receiving, you know, the ways of these lineages that have like worked so hard to preserve their culture in the midst of colonialism. And that's not the point of this. The point of this is, though, there was a correction ceremony, and one of the elders who was sitting in the church, you know, who I don't think she grew up in it, but she had been walking the red road for a long time and sitting in this way, in a good way, for a long time. She shared with us, because she could see some of the women when they were singing their songs, that it was not necessarily just like for them to connect in with the, you know, medicine of the song and like really feel into the prayer that they were singing, but it was for them to, you know, sound beautiful. And she caught that, and she started to speak to this like performative element of the feminine, this performative aspect of the feminine. And what she shared was, I've learned in this way, in walking in this way, that, you know, when they sit in the teepee, you're fully clothed, you're fully covered in sweat. You're not like naked in a sauna. You are like in your prayer, and it's like this. She said, you know, in these ways we're taught to be, what is the word that she used? So we're taught to move humbly and to move quietly as women, and it's not out of submission, but when you are attracting a lot of attention and energy to yourself, you're more distracted and you're less able to get more work done in the world. And I wanted to speak to this too, because I said something that felt kind of controversial for me, even in the parts of me that are recovering these parts of my femininity. In my last video, I said, you know, the most embodied goddess in the room is probably not going to be the loudest, most talented, most performative one that's the most naked. She's probably going to be, you know, fully clothed, is what I said, and scanning in the environment of like, okay, moving prophecy, like who needs my love, who needs my medicine, who needs attention, who needs care from the spirit that's moving in me, and like how can I go be with the people that I'm in community with right now, and like really be with them and not make it about me and how I look and how sexy I am and all the validation that I need from that. And while some parts of that are true, you know, I don't actually think that the way a woman dresses necessarily dictates her capacity to offer her medicine. However, I do think that women, when there is this like attention being drawn to, you know, their physique and their beauty, sometimes it can be distracting. And I know that that's like a very, again, controversial thing in the feminist movement of, well, I'm not going to cover up, you know, I'm not going to cover up my shoulders in class because this man can't keep his ish together. But I've shifted, you know. I used to be very rebellious against that and be like, oh, I'm gonna dress how I want to dress, act how I want to act. Like, I literally, no one's gonna tell me how to be or not to be in my body, like, on period. And I still feel some of that, but just again, as I've matured, I've come into this understanding of like, okay, I cannot actually expect that everybody's done that deprogramming work, number one, and number two, it is what this woman said is true. It is easier to do this work when the attention and the energy isn't going towards, you know, me or my beauty or my talent or my skill. It's actually like to offer real healing work towards another person. You really are making it about the other. And that's now getting into more of what I wanted to talk about, is like, what are the more spiritual, more emotional keynotes of the true feminine outside of these, you know, externally perceived notions of femininity. And I'm actually going to share in scripture, you know, kind of what is recommended for us to look for. My nose is so runny from crying. I wish I had a tissue. I don't think I do anywhere. Yeah, I'm just gonna keep sniffling. Okay, but in scripture, the fruits of the spirit are listed as love. So a woman who is big in her love, you know, who truly loves. Joy, who is joyful, who's expressing her joy for life and God and creation. Peace, who carries a peace in her heart. Patience, or long suffering, so that is willing to, you know, put in the work, that is willing to wait for the good things to come into full manifestation and fruition. Who's not forcing something before it's time. Kindness, a person who is kind, that genuinely cares to take care of their human family and their brothers and sisters around them. Goodness, a good-hearted woman. Faithfulness, a woman who has faith, you know, that God is providing and God is always making a way even where there seems to be no way, and that God is always present with us. A gentleness in the spirit. And then the last one is self-control. And that is, again, what I was wanting to really make the message about our sexual energy. It's like this holding, not out of shame, not out of restriction, not out of oppression, but just out of control, self-control. And I think that's most of what I wanted to share. I don't want these to get too long, because I know that most of us have days to be about and kind of broken attention spans from social media, which is why I've like chosen to go more towards YouTube, because Instagram feels so fractured to me. I think I want to just share one last story about this shift in me, you know, that I think encompasses a lot of like archetypally, I guess, like what we're taught as femininity. Okay, so I think right now there's a lot of this like elevation of the queen archetype, and I think there's also kind of this misperception of the queen as like the queen, you know, is like rich and beautiful and has power and influence, and maybe all those things are true, but I feel like the true note of a queen and a woman who is like more in this mature expression of her femininity, right? Because there's the princess. The princess is kind of just this like brat, like she's full maiden mode, just like I get served, everyone serves me. And I think sometimes people like take that into the queen archetype and think that they can like be running, you know, their queendom with that same mentality. And it's like, no, the queen is really here to serve. And I remember when this started to come online for me, I was at this like retreat in Mexico, I think, and maybe it wasn't that, it was something else, but there was like these beds that I was going to be sharing with other women, and an older version of me that was like more in the princess archetype, maybe a little bit more entitled, would have, you know, there was like one bigger bed and then there was like a smaller bed or a couple of smaller beds, and I would have just been like, oh, you know, I need the bigger bed because like my sleep is really important to me, and for me to show up as my best self, like I need to make sure that I have really good sleep. And I even like had that kind of come up, but then I remember this like voice of this queen in me being like, no, like we are good on God. We are in the position of a queen because we have, you know, stepped into that, walked into that realm of royalty, and what that means is like we are always taken care of. But because of that, it is our responsibility to take care of others. And in that space, that deep space of knowing that we are good, we are resourced, we are whole on God, it's easy for us to like give what we have and the best of what we have to other people. And so I remember just being like, wow, you know, this is like, I genuinely want to give, you know, the bigger, the nicer thing to this other person, even if there's like this thing in my psyche that feels like, oh, this like sad, more like, well, I wanted the bigger piece or the bigger bed or this or that. And I think this is why I was confusing it, because I remember this other situation happening in this retreat where there was like all these feathers being given out. This is so silly, but there was all these feathers being given out, and all the women like rushed and everyone wanted to like get the best feather. And I just remember being like, I don't want to play this game. And I felt kind of like weirded out by the energy, and so I kind of stayed back. And then the person who had the feathers was like, oh, you know, I actually found these like really, really special feathers that were like in this like backstock or whatever. And then I ended up getting one of those because I had just like held my energy and like held my self-control and not been in this like, I need to get for me energy. And I think that's kind of the energy that society has like confused with the queen energy. Is the queen is like, I'm running my queendom, I'm getting my got, I'm getting my bag, I'm getting my money, I'm getting my man's, like, and I'm doing it like on me, you know, and I don't care if I have to like use my sexual energy to get that, like that's the way the world works, like I'm gonna get that, I'm gonna put in that work. And again, like nothing wrong with that necessarily, but what you're not getting to experience then when you feel totally responsible for having your own back is like the beauty of like God really having your back, and life really having your back, and that surrendered knowing. And then in that surrendered knowing and in that relaxed space of knowing that you're like fully provided for, and that you don't have to compromise yourself or sell yourself or your sex or your this or your that, you know, to like be okay and to live and survive. Your energy is then more free and available out of that survival mode to really be more attentive and caring towards other people and like what their needs are and how you can be of service to them. And it's not so just like me, what am I getting? Like this like, yeah, kind of power centered overdrive that I feel like a lot of like boss babes can tend to find themselves in, and this like entitlement too, because it's like, well, I'm putting in all this work, like I deserve to have these nice things. And there's not that same awareness of like, well, no, I only have these nice things because God bestowed them to me, because it was inherited for me to sit in this seat of like running this queendom, and I'm literally just in this seat so that I can redistribute this wealth and these resources and these good things to others, and like offer this healing, and like from my nurtured place, you know, from my seat, like I can really help the people around me. Yeah, and that's like true queen, like true feminine energy. And then I think there's even beyond that, there's empress energy, which is like, now it's the whole kingdom. You know, and I think if you move through these archetypes and you shift, out of your maiden era, out of your princess era, out of your like me, I get, serve into your queen era. And then, maybe if you do well in that queen era and you are moving in that right way, and then you get elevated even to like a whole empire. And whatever that means for you in your business and your walk and your work and your wealth, with your family, with your man, with your friends. But anyway, I think, our purity, our obedience are those fruits of the spirit, that if we focus on those, we can trust ourselves and therefore be more entrusted with more of that power, affluence, resources, and then that knowing that like this isn't coming from us because we're not manipulatively wielding our energy, our beauty to have those things, but it's just like on God, it's for us, and we can trust that on God, this success is for us, this man is for us, these relationships are for us, these communities. And if we stopped, last thing I'll say, I broke down this kid that I was nannying the other day broke this down for me. And we always say, like, whenever we think something's interesting, we go, interesting, very interesting. And like, that's just one of our little things. And then he was like, into resting. And I was like, oh my God, the most interesting people are into resting, which means they're not this energy that's like constantly like creating itself, putting itself out there, but they're just resting. They're sitting back. They're like this space for other energies, maybe even to like come and entertain them and offer them wisdom and knowledge and things that they can later, from that space of like resting and witnessing and listening and receiving, put into their service or their work, So I don't know, that was just a final tangent, but yeah, those are more of my thoughts on femininity, and I hope you guys feel more of my heart in this one. Not that my heart wasn't in that last one, but I think there was more of this like like fierce lioness maw fire of purification of like, what the fuck is all of this? Like, we need to get it together, and then now today there's like this like softening, more compassion, getting off the pedestal, like humanization, and then but also like real liberation and call to rise, and just move a little different. Okay, that's my TED Talk for the day. I hope that this is medicine for whoever hears it, and that this feels empowering. Love you guys. Thanks for listening.